Hello.
Hello.
The seatbelt check is around the corner. For your safety, remain seated with your seatbelt fastened and your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the vehicle at all times. And please supervise children. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the sixth and final video from our October 2020 trip to Walt Disney World. Today we are going to be going to the Epcot theme park, and as you can see, the first thing we did that day was we hopped on Test Track, and here is just a little bit of footage from Test Track.
Energizing for power test.
Your hair's messed up.
The Test Track ride is actually sponsored by Chevrolet, and when you step off the ride, you go into an area. It's like a really nice showroom, and they have the new mid-engine Corvette there, and it was in its own room. The only tripod I had was this tiny Manfrotto, tiny little handheld tripod, so I put the Z50 and the 16-50 kit lens, this tiny thing, on it and made a photograph of the Corvette there in that room. So there are people constantly going in and out of this room as they spill off of the Test Track ride, and it was really difficult to get a shot of the car with nobody in it. And in this 1 second exposure, you can see a ghost over on the right hand side that was kind of in and out of the shot. I really liked the shot, but I wish I could have brought a little bit taller tripod so I could have masked out the lights under the car. The park didn't open till 11 o'clock, so by the time we were done riding Test Track, it was time for lunch. So we decided that we were going to eat in the Mexico Pavilion, and on the way there I put the 50-250 kit lens, the other lens from the Z52 lens kit, and I made a photograph of some flowers. And I kept this lens on for quite a bit of the rest of the day. Okay, so I made less flower photos this time than last time. We had a lot more stuff to do on this trip, and I'll tell you about that a little bit later in the video, but I do love the way these yellow flowers turned out. Here's the restaurant we ate at, La Cantina. It's a counter service restaurant that kind of acts like a full service restaurant, and we ate out here in the gazebo area of their dining room outdoors. There's my entree. I had the empanadas con queso. It was really good. Heather had the nachos, and she said she really enjoyed hers. I had a Dos Equis. Casey had the nachos, and she got the jalapenos on hers. I don't think Heather did. And Heather got this margarita. I made a photograph of this beautiful female boat-tailed grackle there while we were eating lunch. I thought the photo came out nicely. After lunch, we wanted to go to the Norway Pavilion and ride the Frozen Ever After ride. So we went there, and the ride broke down while we were in line. Something we did on this trip that we haven't done in a long time, we stopped and took a look at the Circle Vision 360 movies in the China and Canada pavilions. This is the waiting area to go into Circle Vision 360 in China. Later in the day, a cavalcade came by, and on this one there was Princess Aurora, aka Sleeping Beauty. It was kind of fun to get a photograph of her. There were other princesses on it as well, and I was able to get a photograph of Snow White as she was blowing kisses to her fans there on the side of the road in Epcot. Now, I told you I didn't get a whole lot of flower photos on this trip, but I really love this particular one. I love these white flowers, nicely in focus with the out of focus red flowers in the background. It's kind of Christmassy looking. I thought it came out great, and I was really happy with the way the 50-250 performed on this trip. There's lots of beautiful photography opportunities in the World Showcase as you look across the World Showcase Lagoon. Most of the time you point your camera over at Spaceship Earth, the Epcot ball, but there's plenty of other things to see. For example, in this shot, I have what's called a friendship boat in the foreground, and that's the Mexico Pavilion and the gazebo we ate at in the background. While we were waiting to see the 360 surround movie in the Canada Pavilion, it was really dark in the waiting area, but I liked the light coming in from the side, so I put the DX35 f1.8G lens on and made a photograph of Heather while we waited. Look at the cool bokeh from the DX35 f1.8, and Heather's eyes, or at least the near one, is nice and sharp. Wow, that Canada Far and Wide Circle Vision 360 movie is amazing. Well worth your time. Then we went back to Future World, and specifically the Land Pavilion, where we rode Soarin', and after that we rode the Living with the Land boat ride. I put the 50 to 250 back on and made just a very few video clips from that boat ride.
These plants are definitely on their way up. Innovative growing techniques help keep the water clean for the fish. It's another great way to produce more while using less. In our lab, Epcot scientists are working with the U.S. Department of Agriculture on a number of innovative projects. The goal of these efforts is to produce higher yielding and better quality plants.
Then we headed to Spaceship Earth, which is the large, what people call the Epcot ball. We went back to Spaceship Earth and we rode that, and the inside of that attraction is super, super, super dark. And I made a few photos with the DX35 f1.8G. The ride is constantly moving and it's extremely dark inside. I started out with a shutter speed that was a little bit too low, and by the time I moved it up to 1/80th of a second, I was able to capture a couple of photos, including this one from the Renaissance area of the ride. And this is Heather's favorite area of Spaceship Earth. Here's Michelangelo laying on his back on some scaffolding as he paints the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Heather has learned that he is left-handed, but they put his paintbrush in his right hand so you can see his face. After we got off of Spaceship Earth, we came all the way back to the Mexico Pavilion where we had had lunch earlier in the day, and there was actually a line to get inside the indoor part of the Mexico Pavilion. And while we were waiting in that line, I made a few kind of candid street photography type photos using the 35 1.8. I made a few attempts while we were at Epcot to do street photography without using the viewfinder, just kind of pointing the camera from my hip. And most of them didn't come out, but on this one I nailed the shot pretty good. And then as we made our way through the line, we were almost in the Mexico Pavilion, and I saw this couple and decided to make one last street photography type photo before we made our way inside. Once you get inside the Mexico Pavilion, it's basically a bunch of gift shops, one restaurant, and one ride. And I had face and eye detect autofocus on when I was doing street photography, and I didn't turn that off, and the face detect landed on this guy's eye. And then finally we rode the boat ride in the Mexico Pavilion. This is one of Heather's favorite rides, and it's actually called the Grand Fiesta Tour, featuring the 3 Caballeros.
We sing and we samba, we shout. What means ay caramba? Oh yes, I don't know.
By the time we got out of the Mexico Pavilion, the sun was starting to set, and it was really beautiful looking across the lake. Didn't have time to really concentrate and make many photos, but I did make one handheld shot with a 35 1.8, and then I made a handheld panorama with the 35 1.8. I'll show you those now. I thought this f9 shot turned out really nice using the 35 f1.8 with the little island in the middle of the lake and the silhouetted trees, and you can even see some birds flying in. So here is the World Showcase Lagoon. I'm looking out and you can see the Mexico Pavilion on the right, and there's Spaceship Earth. Just really beautiful. This is a 7-shot handheld panorama at f4 using the DX35 f1.8G. Really beautiful sunset that night. I'm glad I took a second to make this panorama. By this time, the Frozen Ever After ride was repaired and working once again in the Norway Pavilion. So we went there and waited in the long line and finally got to ride it.
She's making everyone a snowy summer day.
Alright, as you can see, it's extremely dark inside the Frozen Ever After ride, and here is Sven, and it's an animatronic, but it has a screen where the eyes are, so that's really cool. And then here is Elsa. She's an animatronic, but she has a screen for her entire face, so they can really do a lot, and I made these photographs with the 35 f1.8. The park was about to close when we got off of the Frozen Ever After ride, and we hurried back to Test Track and rode it for the second time of the day. And it was fun because the first time we rode it, the park wasn't officially open yet, and when we rode it again, the park was already actually closed. As long as you get in line before park closing, they'll let you ride it. So it was after closing when we rode it again. On our last trip here, I did all of my Test Track video with the GoPro above the windshield, and it had a lot of wind noise, but a clearer picture. And on this trip, I'm doing all the video with the GoPro behind the windshield, much less wind noise, but not a very clear picture. All right, thanks for watching this 6th and final episode of our trip to Walt Disney World Resort in October of 2020, where I used the Nikon Z50 for all the photography. I hope you enjoyed the series, and we won't be going back to Disney until probably July of 2021, and then who knows what kind of camera I'll carry for that trip. But thanks for watching, have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye-bye.